All right. Good evening, everyone. We'll start in about a minute. All right. Okay. Few more seconds to go, guys. All right. It's 8 p.m. sharp, and we can start. So, hello, everyone, and welcome to this fifth session of the Project Management in Practice program. So far, we've had 4 sessions. Session one was about conducting a study phase before the project start. Second session was about drafting the charter and kicking off the project. Third session was about identifying the stakeholders, dealing with them, creating stakeholders register, etc. And the fourth session, which was last week, it was about creating a project schedule. So building a Gantt chart, and we've used a scheduling tool, and we have shared it with you. Also, we've shared all the recordings of all those sessions on our YouTube channel. So today's session is the fifth one. And in today's session, we're going to talk about communications and the project, which are really, really important, and not just in the project. Actually, we've reshaped a little bit this content so it would fit, all types of initiatives, work, not just projects. And we will go through different scenarios. So sit tight and just, follow with us. All right. So actually, I remember something very important back in the days when I was still learning my, trying to find my first steps in the project management world. And my first trainer once asked us a question. He asked us, what is the most important aspect of the project, or the most important thing a project manager should do in a project? And we all tried to guess. Somebody said, it's about, good planning, and somebody else said about it's about having good scheduling skills. Another person said about controlling cost. Somebody else said, about, managing risks, etc. And the teacher or the trainer replied, even though, all what you have mentioned, actually, it does apply. Yeah, it applies, to, being important in managing project, but actually, properly managing the project communications of the project is actually what is the first reason for the project success or failure. Okay, it's not the budget, it's not the schedule, it's not the good controlling of the execution, it's not the proper planning, is actually the communications. So it never left my mind, and I was always thinking about it. In all the projects I personally managed, I always, gave, a significant importance to communications in the project, because, in the project, we're dealing with humans. So whether it's stakeholders, whether it's the project team members, we need to ensure there is proper communications in place. Now, in communications management, one of the first things you need to do as a project manager, and here I'm talking about general project management, okay? I'm not talking about any specific type of project management, just a generic one, project management. First thing you need to do and start with is building the project agenda. Okay, you need to make sure that building the project communications plan. Okay, you really need to build the project communications plan, and to start with now. In today's session, what we're gonna do, we're gonna have three sections in today's session. First of all, we're going to go through some slides where we'll be talking about some meeting types and some scenarios. First meeting types. Then we're going to have a look at some of the templates, which we will share with you later in the description of the video once we upload it to YouTube. And then third, we will go through some scenarios that, they repeat in most projects. So you guys know what you need to do first when you are in that scenario, right? So now you as a project manager, you really need to build like your communications plan. You need to make sure that from the beginning of the project, you specify which meetings are you going to have in your project? What is the agenda for each meeting? Who should be there? Who should attend in each meeting? The frequency of those meetings, and also the format. Okay, I mean that's the minimum. That's the bare minimum of your information you need to provide in your communications plan. So then everyone involved in the project, they know what to expect, what kind of meetings. Okay, what whether they're on site, whether they're online, whether they're face to face, video conferencing, phone conferencing, etc. Okay, so then this will help them have more clarity and visibility on the project, and in return, you can ensure their commitment. Okay, and also everyone will know in advance what is expected from them. And when should they attend, and if there is anything they need to bring or prepare in advance, etc. Now, when we're talking about projects, there are probably 5 or 6 must-have meetings in every project, almost. Now, I'm not going to talk about Agile or Scrum in particular because, in the Scrum framework, for example, there is already a predefined set of meetings that should be there, such as the sprint planning, the daily meeting, the sprint review, the sprint retrospective, etc. So I'm not going to mention that. Okay, I'm going to speak, generally about project management. Yeah, sort of, basing that on waterfall practices, but they've become sort of more generic practices. And even though we use agile, actually, even in our projects with agile, we sometimes do need some of those, off the framework meetings. Right now, the first meeting, which we already talked about, and it was in session 2, is the project is a kickoff meeting. Let's not call it the project kickoff meeting. It's just a kickoff meeting because actually, I'm going to mention here 3 scenarios. When do we need a kickoff meeting? So now, a kickoff meeting or a start meeting. Usually, in a kickoff meeting, if it's a project kickoff meeting, usually the invitees are the sponsor, key stakeholders, senior management, the customer, etc. And usually we discuss project objectives. We introduce the stakeholders to each other. We make sure they understand the project objectives and that they are all aware of the project's existence. And also we try to collect the charter approval. Now, this is when we're talking about the project kickoff meeting. Okay. However, in some projects or in some project management practices, the kickoff meeting does not happen just after the initiation meeting, because here I've put here frequency after initiation, generally it's after initiation, but sometimes also we can have a kickoff meeting right after planning. Okay, so we sort of have a first kickoff meeting after initiation, because during the planning we're going to use time, resources, etc. So then we will have another kickoff meeting after the planning, just sort of to validate with the stakeholders the project plan. But also, in some other practices, there could be kickoff meeting, at the beginning of each project phase. That happens. I personally have used that in one of my projects, in the pharma industry, and there was sort of a stage gate or a phase review. So at the end of each phase, we made a review, and then if we took a decision to move on to the next phase, then of course, we had a kickoff meeting for that next or subsequent phase. Okay. Usually, kickoff meetings they happen, with stakeholders. We could have them preferably on site or at least with video conferencing. At least the stakeholders they could know each other, meet each other, face to face or virtually, or at least have it online in case you have stakeholders, spread across the world. All right. So now that's the first meeting you need to have in your kickoff meeting. Of course, I'm going to come to some notes later, on how to organize the meetings, how to use some tools. And then, of course, we'll talk about the meeting minutes. We will share with you the template for the meeting minutes, the agenda, of course, a sample agenda. We cannot share all the agendas, templates, but, it's just a sample agenda, etc. Okay. So the first must-have kickoff meeting. Usually we do a kickoff, even if we are, in agile or in waterfall. Generally, we do it because, for stakeholders, it's really a must-have meeting. Then, another type of meeting is a planning meeting. Of course, we talked about earlier the agile planning meeting, which happens at the beginning of each iteration. Now, generally in project management, you as a project manager, of course, you need to have a planning meeting, or generally it's planning meetings, because usually, if you're not an agile, purely agile, or pure agile, then you will need several planning meetings with subject matter experts, SMEs, with the team members, with key stakeholders who might have some input for your project plans. And usually the planning, it doesn't end in one meeting, all right? But at least you started. So this is why generally in projects we do have several planning meetings where we try to first of all gather all the requirements from stakeholders, even though we start with that in the initiation, but we continue with that in the planning. So then we can fix the requirements. Of course, in the planning, we usually try to build a work breakdown structure, try to start define the activities, the sequencing between the activities as we saw last week, resources for each activities, try to, draft a schedule, and then at the end, try to, at the end of planning phase, we try to have, the baselines, the project baselines, etc. Okay, so planning meetings are very important part of the project, so you need them. They're really important. We mentioned earlier who are the participants in the planning meetings. In waterfall, usually the planning meetings, they do repeat until we reach a final plan or a baseline. And in agile, it usually happens at the beginning of every sprint. And here it depends, it depends on what kind of agile approach you're using. Generally, if you talk about, the basic one, which is or one of the simplest frameworks, which is Scrum, it happens at the beginning of every sprint, the planning meeting. All right, format the same. It could be on site, it could be in for sort of or in a form of workshops, it could be online, etc. Right. So usually, but we do need planning meetings. Okay, it's really important, especially if you have experts on board who can help you with defining your project plans. Right. And then another important meeting, which you as a project manager, you need to think of, or you need to have really, which is an internal project status meeting. Okay. Now, the internal status meeting usually takes place with all the team members of the project. I mean, your team who are executing the work. You could probably have some stakeholders in there, okay, who need to attend. I'm not going to specify which stakeholders, but it could be, somebody from or some people from other teams who, have some stake in the project plan. So, it would be good for them to attend. Usually, the internal status meeting has got a purpose of tracking the progress, okay, internally with the team, discuss issues and what is blocking the team from, advancing, have updates on assigned actions to different project team members, any sort of other open discussion. Now, some of you might wonder, why is there not listed a technical discussion or a discussion on risks? We will come to that, in the next slide, all right? But usually the project internal status meeting is for the project manager to meet with their project team and discuss progress on assigned activities or assigned actions or tasks, okay? So then, the project manager will be able then later, to report on that in their report to the senior management or the key stakeholders of the project. Okay. And also the internal status meeting is very important to, in order to discuss the different issues that the team has been facing and, maybe, try to find solutions for them. Okay. Now the frequency, I mean, personally, for the project internal status meetings, I usually have them weekly. Okay. And if you specify, if you choose weekly, you have to specify the day and the time. When would you like to have that meeting? Usually I do it
at the end of the week, after I make sure that my team has progressed, with the work. But it's really up to you when we'd like to have it. And the format, again, it can be on site, can be online, in case you have virtual teams or remote team members. Okay, but so far on this page, these are three must-have meetings. We're talking about, we'll provide you in a while with a template. We'll come to that. Then on the next slide, of course, you in your project, you need to have a steering board meeting or a steering committee meeting, and these usually takes place with the key stakeholders, sponsors, senior management, decision makers, any other project stakeholders. And in this steering committee meeting, we will discuss. Okay. We will discuss the progress so far on the project, so the project status. You might, as a project manager, ask the steering committee members for guidance because they're steering the project, so they're guiding you and your project team. You might raise any blocking issues where you need their support, so this is sort of an escalation. You might also raise to their awareness the high risks that they need to be aware of, because you might need to use the reserve, the contingency reserve, or might need some management reserve. Okay, and also you can ask for support for any matters that might exceed your level of authority. Okay, now how often you as a project manager can you have a steering committee meeting on your project? I personally used to if it's an internal steering committee without any external attendees, it's usually bi-weekly or at least once a month. So you could have it, bi-weekly, monthly, it's up to you. And you always have to specify the day and the time of that meeting. But you cannot skip the steering committee meeting. Neither should you permit the key decision makers and key stakeholders to skip it. So you really, as a project manager, you need to emphasize on these stakeholders, emphasize on them to attend this meeting. Make sure that they really understand its importance, especially that they might provide you with critical information or provide any guidance or support. So really, it's really important because along the way in the project, you will notice that some stakeholders, they tend to skip these meetings, which is not healthy for the project. Okay, so you need to make sure that everyone understands why this meeting is really important and why they should attend. Okay. And the format, of course, could be on-site, could be video conferencing, it could be online, etc. Okay, so this steering committee meeting or steering board meeting is really, really important. Okay, now, should the customer attend the steering committee meeting, or should we have a separate customer meeting, or is it one meeting? Now it depends. Okay, it depends to the setup of the project. How did you define the communications plan of the project? Also, it depends on the relationship that is between the customer on one side and your organization on the other side. Now, usually, at least in my projects, I usually tend to have two different, let's say, high status meetings. One is, for the internal stakeholders, and one with the customer, which I call the customer meeting. Here, the customer representatives should attend, the sponsor, some key decision makers. And usually in a customer meeting, we share, almost the same type of information, but we share something that the customer can see, because in the internal status meeting, we tend to discuss some internal matters, especially when we talk about blocking issues. There are some things that we don't want to share with the customer. We keep them internally. That's why we tend to have a different meeting with the customer. But high status or high-ranking people do attend that meeting, especially the sponsor and decision makers. And in that customer meeting, we discuss the progress on the deliverables. We discuss all the shared issues and risks. That's why I call them shared issues and risks, because those are issues and risks that are shared between us and the customer. So they should be aware of them. We are aware of them. And also we discuss, for example, next steps, or also in that meeting, we usually tend to take decisions, etc. Okay, or maybe have the view of the customer on some of the matters, of some of the issues. And again, as I said, maybe it's not the same set of information that we share here in a internal status committee meeting and one with the customer. Even though some people, think that the customer is always the sponsor, it's not really the case. Sometimes the customer is the sponsor, sometimes the customer is not the sponsor. I think we've mentioned that, we explained it, in session 2. Now, the frequency of the meeting with the customer, it really depends if there are any contractual obligations between your organization and the customer, or the project steering committee and the customer. Usually it's monthly or at the end of every sprint. And again, the format could be on-site, could be online, could be video conferencing. The most important is that the customer is always aware of the progress. Where do we stand in the project? Okay. Okay, now I would call these first 5 meetings the must-have meetings in every project. But however, there are some other types of meetings which we call them on-demand meetings or ad hoc meetings. Sometimes we tend to have meetings specific meetings to discuss risks. Okay, I personally used to have the risks discussed, on a separate meeting, and not as part of the internal meeting. Even though in the steering committee we do discuss risks, okay, but with my team in the internal status meeting, if the project is simple, I also, make sure that we discuss risks in the internal status meeting with the team. But if the project is a huge and complex, then I prefer to have a separate risk meeting. Also, we can have ad hoc or on-demand meetings for technical discussions in case some of the team members, they need some clarifications, from some representatives of the customer, or from other people, such as with the vendors, etc. Or sometimes we need to have an ad hoc meeting to discuss team issues, in case, for example, of conflicts between team members. Then we need to take that separate in separate meetings. Okay, or we can have also meetings for lessons learned, and that's actually is a must now. In every project to have a meeting or meetings for lessons learned. Okay. Now, of course, the participants depends on the meeting. In technical discussion meetings, we need to have the relevant technical people. For risks, we need to have the people who are, or should be aware of the risk and might, contribute to mitigating the risks or the threats. For team issues, now it depends. If it's a personal issue between team members, then we take them, in a separate meeting. For the lessons learned meeting is the whole team to share, the lessons learned, the best practices, and how we solve the issues. Frequency, usually these on-demand or ad hoc meetings, they are not regular. Okay, generally, okay, usually. And the format, again, it can be on-site or it can be online. Okay, so now I've mentioned the 5 most famous or known meetings again, and some on-demand meetings. Let's go now and let's have a look on some of the templates. Okay, now let's now actually I'll go with some notes first. Okay, I'll go to the next slide with some notes first. Here are some really key important notes. So first of all, usually the project manager attends in all these mentioned meetings, and actually it's the project manager, the one who usually schedules all these meetings and is responsible for making sure that they happen, they take place, that people join. Um, Unless if the project manager is absent, or maybe some meetings such as these ones, the ad hoc technical discussions, maybe the project manager does not need to be involved, and then the project manager can either facilitate the meeting between the technical people who are involved or should be involved, or maybe just let them schedule it themselves. But usually it's the project manager really who makes sure that the communications plan is applied. Make sure that you as a project manager use a scheduling tool, whatever, like it could be any tool. For example, when I used to work at IBM, we used to use IBM internal scheduling tool, which was part of Floats Notes, if I remember well. And then you can use any other scheduling tools from Microsoft or from any other platforms or software you use. Make sure that you always send the invitation of the meeting early, okay? Early in advance as part of your Outlook invitation. and attach the agenda. Okay, we will see in a while how to create an agenda. Attach the agenda and the meeting invitation. Okay, so everyone is aware what will be discussed in that particular meeting, and we will see in a while an example of a meeting agenda. Now, if you ask how early should I send the invitation, it really depends. Now, for example, for a customer meeting, I usually send the invitation like early in the week. If we will have the meeting on Friday that week, I send out the invitation on Monday, and I attach the agenda in that meeting invite. And then on Wednesday, I make sure that I contact the key stakeholders to let them know that I've sent out the invitation. Usually, when I send the invitation, I make sure that I receive responses and I get notifications about the responses of the attendees. Because then in the tool I can check who really opened that invitation, who accepted it, who declined it. And then, if somebody declined the invitation and they're really high status, they need to attend the meeting, then, I try to, either call them, try to convince them to attend, or try to maybe reschedule. Not really schedule, maybe just change the timing, not the day, the timing. Because because from the experience, if I keep rescheduling the meeting because this person cannot attend, that person cannot attend, then it becomes sort of a habit, and people tend to ask then off all the time to reschedule. And I remember in some of my early projects, I could not hold a steering committee meeting for almost 2 to 3 months. Okay, because each week somebody excused themselves, and they were really they needed to attend. So what I decided then to stick to the time and day of the meeting, not change it. Okay, and if somebody is absent, then they should assume responsibility for that, because I have shared the communications agenda with them in advance. I know people usually are busy, they have other initiatives, other projects going on, they're involved in a lot of different matters, but still, if you show a lot of flexibility in your project meetings, and you keep rescheduling them, then that might become a habit, as I said earlier. So you want to avoid that. So really, don't do it often. Okay, but make sure really, usually, as I said, 48 hours before the start of any meeting, or 24 hours, I usually call the most important stakeholders and make sure that they will attend. It might be exhausting sometimes, chasing all those people around, but you will have to do it for your project success. Remember, you're a project manager, you're responsible for your project success, so sometimes you will have to do it. Okay, and then the last thing in these meeting notes, and of course, before we move on to the next section to check all the templates, make sure that you always send the meeting minutes no later than 24 hours after the meeting. Usually, I tend to send the meeting minutes on the same day, clean, make sure that I send to all the people who were supposed to attend. But if you cannot do it in the same day, or if you have a lot of meetings, or your meetings end late, then make sure that you send them early thing, or first thing in the next day. Now let's have a look at some of the templates. I'm going to share them with you. They're really pretty easy templates. Again, you can find them always online. You can create your own templates. Now, in this first template here, we're talking about, for example, how to create a meeting agenda. Let's suppose now, or let's take as an example the weekly team meeting agenda template. This agenda you create, and you make sure that you attach as part of your meeting invitation. You specify the day and time of the meeting, the location, start and end time, the meeting name, who will be facilitating this meeting. Usually it's you as a project manager. And then you might, of course, list some of the items, such as what were the achievements of the week so far, which will be discussed, a progress overview, such as what has been completed, challenges faced, solution deployed, for example, lessons learned. This is what you guys are going to discuss. So once you start the meeting, you will be filling out all this with your team. You'll be discussing all the achievements, the work completed, the challenges, the solutions, the lessons learned. Also, in that meeting, you will go through the previous the actions from the previous meetings, the actions discussed in the last meeting, what has been done so far on those actions, Again, and then if there will be any new agenda items, if there will be any new items that you guys will need to discuss in that meeting. For example, you might need a particular technical discussion, or you probably face some situation in the project that you need to bring up in that meeting. So you might want to include that as part of your agenda. Okay, it's really important that in your agenda you specify what you guys are going to talk about. Okay, so this is an example of how to create an agenda, and then in case there will be any review of any items, okay, and when will be the next meeting date. Now, this template is ready, okay, and this template, in this template, you will not fill out all these sections, you fill them out during that meeting, okay? So during that meeting, when you get all the information from the team, then you will fill in all the information here. But here, you make sure that you have specified the sections or the items which will be part of that weekly team meeting. Of course, this, because we use the weekly team meeting as an example because it's the most frequent one since it's weekly. Also, you need to create a sample agenda or a similar agenda for your steering committee meeting. And any meeting you schedule as a project manager, make sure that you create an agenda in advance. You attach it in the meeting invitation when you send it out, okay? And make sure that everyone, once they join the meeting, they're aware of the agenda. What are we going to talk about today? What are we going to discuss today? Okay, so now that's really, really important to specify the agenda, the topics that will be discussed, okay, in that meeting, right? Now, this is a template or an example of an agenda. You can create your own template. It's really pretty easy. This just as an indication. Then it's up to you how you want to form your agendas, and you don't need to use the same template, for every meeting, because usually in the steering committee you will have a different type of agenda template than for the internal status meeting, the meeting with the customer. So yeah, you might use or create different agenda templates because each meeting's agenda depends on who is going to join, who's going to attend, and what are you going to discuss, all right? Now, then once your meeting is done, then you will need to send the meeting minutes, okay? Now, the meeting minutes, or we call them also the meeting notes, okay? These are, the notes or the summary of what was discussed in that meeting, in that particular meeting. And I will tell you, first of all, why is it so important to create the meeting notes and send them out? Because people forget, okay? So you as a project manager, you need to write down, document everything that was discussed during the meeting, all the agreements, all the changes, all the updates, all the actions that were agreed. You put them in the template, for example, if you would use this template or any other template, okay? And you send them out, and I will show you something later on that will make sure that everybody will commit to those minutes, because sometimes people change their minds after the meeting. During the meeting they say something, they agree to something, and after the meeting they change their minds, and that always impacts and affects your project. And in all the PMP training that I've been conducting since many, many, many years, a lot of participants share the same issue, when it comes to meetings and communications. They say that during the meetings, all the parties agree on something. Okay, for example, you reach some agreement with the customer or the key stakeholders, and then after the meeting, 1 week, 10 days, few days, 1 month after the meeting, they change their mind and they say, no, we didn't agree to that. So that's why we need to have meeting minutes, because those minutes will guarantee or ensure that people really cannot change their minds that easily, because it's written, it's in there, it was sent out, everybody received them. And I will show you some trick in a while, how what to use in order to ensure acceptance, and that everybody keeps their or keeps the agreement. Now, here in the meeting minutes, you will mention the date of the meeting, where was it held, if it was, for example, online, if it was on site, where, if at the customer's location, at our location, at our, in our premises, or if it was online, the meeting name, when was the start time and the end time, meeting notes created by whom, who was the facilitator. So actually, these should be meeting notes. Meeting notes created by whom, who was the facilitator of the meeting, what was the type of the meeting, if it was held online, video conferencing, which tool was used, and then who were the attendees, okay, attendees and their names, their functions, etc., and who were absent, okay, who are the absentees, okay, who did not attend the meeting. Now that's very important. You need to mention really who attended and who was absent, okay, because then if something, some important item on the agenda was not discussed, and it was not discussed because particular people who were responsible for those items did not attend, then everybody knows why did we not discuss that particular item on the agenda. Okay, so you make sure that you list there who attended and who was absent. Okay. Now, once you're done with that, and then you move on to your notes. Okay. Now, here you might have a lot of different items, to be discussed in the meeting. So here we've created this template, or this template is actually separated by items. So first of all, here we will, you will mention here the first item that was discussed on the agenda. It could be, for example, a progress update. It could be an issue. It could be a risk. It could be a technical discussion about a particular topic or subject or item, etc. How much time was allocated, if you want to mention that. By whom was it presented? Okay, the name of the presenter of that particular item that was discussed. For example, if we're discussing a business item, then maybe it's the sponsor or the customer. If we discussed a technical item, maybe it's a technical lead or architect, or if it was a risk, then maybe it was brought up by somebody responsible for that risk. And then what were the actions agreed, on that item? If we have agreed on some action items, then we need to mention them, the action item, the owner or the responsible of that action, the deadline, and then, we will report on the status for the next meeting. Okay. And here you might want to add some more description. Okay. So what was exactly discussed? Because usually in meetings, we tend to have a lot of different discussions, agreements, etc. So for that particular item, you might want to mention what was discussed, not exactly who said what. It's not that exact, purpose of who I said this, you said that. No, that's not the exact purpose of it. Okay. But what was really discussed, what was agreed, maybe what was mentioned. For example, if we've discussed certain solution, technical solution, so maybe we mentioned that solution A is not good because of this, this, and that. Solution B is better because of this, this, and that. But we prefer solution C because, technically it does this and that. Okay, so that's what you usually write down here in that discussion section. Okay, and you might want to leave some remarks. For example, Mr. XYZ disagree because of an experience with the same item or the same solution on a previous project, and they have some concerns, or they raised a potential risk associated with this particular solution, etc. So you might really want to list all the details, all the necessary details related, to that particular item. Now, once in that meeting you're done with that item, then you will move on to the next item on the agenda. Okay. Again, which could be a business item, technical item, etc. Again, how much time was allocated for that discussion? Again, you might want to put that. You can, remove it. Present by whom? And then again, if there are any actions that were agreed. Remember, guys, these are meeting minutes. Okay, so actually here, this is sort of a summary. You will mention a summary of all what was discussed in that meeting. Now. Again, so the template is actually going further to item 3, item 4, etc. Now, you might be asking the question, I might not be able to remember everything that was discussed during the meeting. What can I do? So you see, I used to trick actually in my first or my early projects. I used to use a recording tool called Audacity. Okay, so with this Audacity, because I was junior, I could not probably remember everything that was in the discussion. So whenever I attended the meeting, I turned on that Audacity. I recorded what all the meeting participants were saying, and then after the meeting, I stayed in a quiet place. I listened again to that meeting. I paused. I took the notes. I wrote down everything that was discussed. If it's an action item, if it's a change request approval, if it's a risk, an issue, a solution, a proposal, an agreement, whatever that was discussed. And I was mentioning who said it. Again, if there are any remarks, etc. Okay, that helped me really in my early projects. That helped me because I could not remember the names. Maybe the solution or the whole area of the project was new to me. Maybe because for example, I was an IT project manager and then I moved to pharma. Okay, and the whole thing in the pharma industry or in the banking industry or in the construction industry, the whole discussions, all the discussions were new to me. But still, I managed to be there as a project manager because I'm senior. I can be in any type of projects and in any industries because I'm PMP certified. But still, all the discussions were new to me. I was not sure I understand well. So really, I use some recording tools because it helped me first of all remember. I would, I would avoid the risk or the threat of forgetting things, and it really helped me. Okay, I made sure that I captured all what was discussed, and made sure that I captured them right, correctly. And then when it comes to the most critical point about people forgetting what was agreed, people changing their minds. So these meeting minutes were saving me. I made sure that I always send them 24 hours, no later than 24 hours after the meeting, so people wouldn't change their minds. And usually in my meeting notes, I included a sentence that is very similar to this. If I receive no objection or remarks within 48 hours after sending these meeting minutes, then these minutes are considered as approved. Okay, so when I send the PDF of the meeting notes, or maybe if I send them directly in the body of the email, okay, and I include that sentence, that particular sentence, okay, that if you do not send any objection or any remarks within 48 hours after the minutes are sent, then these minutes are considered as approved, which means if there were any agreements or any assigned action items or any approvals of any change requests, for example, or any budget increase or any mitigation plan for any risk, then all of them are valid. So all of those are valid because actually did not send an objection. And I tell you guys, it happened in a lot of my projects that some stakeholders came back a week later or 4 days later and said, oh, I don't agree with that, that thing, that discussion, or with that approval, or I don't approve. And I tell them, it's too late. It's simply too late. Why is it too late? Because actually you've had enough time in the meeting to raise your objection, and then you had 48 hours after the meeting to raise your objection. You didn't do so, then it's considered as approved. Now maybe some of you will say, oh, you know what, that doesn't happen in real life. In real life, we don't do that. If I would do that, then my boss would fire me or the customer would fire me. Again, I really use that in my meeting notes. And actually, it was my team, my first coach who taught me that. She told me to use it, and she told me that it could save me, and it did save me. Really, it did save me. And even when people argued and said, "Oh, you know what? We didn't see it. I was busy. I didn't see the email. I didn't check the meeting notes. Blah 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 blah." People, tend to say that. They always say that. Okay, so usually, or I already since the kickoff meeting of the project, and in the early in the early meetings, I tell them, and in advance, this is part of my communications management plan. I send you the meeting notes or the meeting minutes no later than 24 hours after the meeting. And if you do not object within 48 hours, or if you do not send, request for rectification or changes, then they are considered as approved and agreed. Okay. You know what? I know that sometimes still some people will object even after the 48 hours deadline, but still, it saved me 90% of the time, really. So guys, I recommend you do something similar. Even if work in different cultures, still, it's a good practice. And as long as you're clear from the beginning of the project that that's your style, that's how you work, then it will help you a lot as a project manager. Okay. Now, we've shared with you a couple of templates. We will leave them for you guys then later in the description of this video once it is uploaded. Let's go now to the third part of this session, which is let's go through some scenarios just to discuss what kind of meeting should you use in each scenario. Let's start with scenario one. Now, the business case has been approved and the project sponsor has assigned the project manager. This latter means the project manager has drafted the charter. Okay. What should the project manager do next? Okay, now you have a business case approved, the charter is drafted. So obviously you're at the beginning of the project. What should you do next? Now, of course, obviously you need to invite the key stakeholders or the stakeholders to a kickoff meeting to ensure that they are all aware of the project, they all understand the project objectives, and also you will use that meeting to go through the project charter and collect approvals on it. Okay. So this is in scenario one. Let's go to the second scenario. During the execution phase, a team member has been performing poorly. Okay. Now, what should you do as a project manager? Okay, or what should you do next? Okay. Now you have a team member. He's got a bad performance. Of course, what you need to do is to have a one-on-one meeting with that team member. You do not talk to that team member in front of the others. You do not do it in public. You do not do it in an internal status meeting. No, you do it on a one-on-one with them. First of all, you need to understand the root cause of their poor performance. Why are they performing poorly? Is it happening since the beginning of the project, or is it just sudden? Did it just suddenly happen? Maybe then if it's sudden, that means something happened to that team member, maybe something personal, or within their family. So you need to check on them. And then you set up an action plan with them. Maybe they need some coaching, some mentoring, some help, etc. So you check on them and you try to understand the root cause of their poor performance. Now, of course, the ones of you who have joined our PMP training, they do understand that in PMI they tend to ask very similar questions, or raise very similar scenarios in the PMP exam, because actually the PMP exam is scenario based exam, is situational or situation based. That means in the PMP exam, all the 180 questions, they are scenario based or situational. Okay. Which means they're based on real scenarios, or scenarios of real projects. Okay. Let's go to scenario three. There has been a conflict with a key project vendor, which has caused a big project delay. Okay, a big delay on the project. What should you do next as a project manager? Now, of course, these are the most famous situations in the PMP exam, but still, it's coming from real scenarios, real project scenarios. So you as a project manager, you need to organize a direct meeting with the vendor. You need to go discuss that conflicting situation or that issue. You try to reach an agreement with them. Okay. And if you're not successful, then you might need to involve the sponsor or the management. Okay. But first of all, you need to try the face-to-face, the direct communication with them. Okay. As much as possible. All right. Now that's scenario three. Let's go to scenario four. a team member raises a risk that turns out to be seriously threatening the project. Okay, now what should you do next? Now here we have a serious risk raised by a team member. This is serious. Okay, from the initial assessment or qualitative assessment or qualitative analysis of the risk, it seems to be serious. That means high probability and high impact, or a high score. What you need to do next is schedule an urgent risk meeting, and involve the right participants. Okay, and when we say the right participants, that could be people from the team or from the stakeholders, but the participants should be people who can contribute to resolving or mitigating this risk, or maybe people who might have some input or some data. Okay, for us. Okay, so that's an example of when you could schedule a risk meeting. Okay, let's have another scenario. A new key stakeholder is not aware of the project status. So now in your project, you have a new stakeholder. They say that they're not aware of what's going on in the project. So what you need to do, of course, simply invite them to the steering committee meeting or any other status update meeting. But make sure that you invite them to a meeting that will help them, receive updates and information on the progress in the project. Okay, and the last scenario we have for in today's session is related to the customer. Of course, we need to have a scenario related to the customer. So here the customer is not happy with the progress made on the project so far. What should you do next as a project manager? Now, if the customer is not happy, so what you need to do is, first of all, you need to find the reason for their dissatisfaction. What happened? You need to do some investigation. Okay, maybe alone, maybe with your team, maybe with some relevant stakeholders. You need to take corrective actions with the team generally, and then you share updates with the customer in the next customer meeting. Okay, so and don't forget that in all of these scenarios, you will be using, or you'll be sending meeting minutes, or at least in most of them. Okay, in most of these scenarios, you will be sending meeting minutes after each meeting. Maybe not this one with the team, unless if you have agreed on a certain action plan, and then you will send meeting minutes between you and that particular team member. You don't need to share with the team members, with all the team, just between you and that team member. Then you send minutes on what has been agreed as action items, what will be done next, how you will be, for example, reviewing the progress on their performance, etc. Okay, but at the end of usually in each of these meetings, okay, after the kickoff meeting, you will send meeting minutes. Again, we mentioned that one now with the team member. The conflict with the vendor, again, whatever agreement you have reached with them, you need to send minutes of that agreement. Usually in this case, you need to make sure that they reply by approved. In some of the meetings, especially with some particular approvals, if they are reached during the meeting, you have two ways on how to manage that approval. Either on the spot, right on the spot, kick it hard, kick it while it's still hot. So like you write it down on a whatever piece of document you prepare, and you have the people sign on that document that they agree with whatever they agreed to. Or if you don't have the luxury to do that, because for example the meeting is online, then immediately you send meeting minutes, and you make sure that you highlight what has been approved, and you ask people to reply with their approval within, for example, 24 hours or 48 hours, depending on the criticality of the subject or of the matter. And you add there the note: if you do not provide your written approval within 48 hours and with no objection from your side, then of course these meetings are considered as approved, or these are it is considered as if you have already approved it. So because sometimes once you reach an agreement during a meeting, people after the meeting, they rethink it and they tend to change their minds. But what you do is, once you send out the meeting minutes, make sure that you highlight what has been approved in that discussion, and write down, please provide your approval within 24 hours. If you do not provide your approval within 24 hours, or you have any objections, please provide it within 24 hours again. If you do not do that, If you do not do so, then it's considered as approved. Okay, that can really save you from a lot of, or from the hassle of rediscussing the subject or the matter again and again and again. Okay, and in the scenario four, of course, you probably might not need to send meeting minutes here, because usually you will manage the risk in the risk register, which we will see in, I think, in one of the next sessions, okay, from this practice program. So you might not need to send meeting minutes unless if there are external parties involved, or maybe you see the need to send meeting minutes. In scenario five, the new key stakeholder will receive meeting minutes automatically once they join the steering committee, and make sure that you add them to the sending list, okay, to the recipients list of the steering committee meeting invite, and also the meeting minutes. And in this scenario, of course, I think this is the most important scenario, which is resolving a disagreement or a dissatisfaction of a customer. Then definitely you will need to send meeting minutes here. Okay. So I hope, guys, you've learned with us today the basics of communications management in a project. We will be sharing the meeting recording tomorrow, and also we will share with you the link to the templates. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining, and see you next week on another session of this project management in practice program. Have a nice evening, everyone.